Hi MDG33. My name is Rhiannon Simpson. I'm a PhD student at the University of Western Ontario, and I'd like to talk about the ways in which we disseminate research in the academic field and in the field of music education specifically. Namely, I want to explore the ways in which the field of music education could utilise the tools of engagement associated with social media to increase the number and demographic of people engaging with scholarly research. This idea comes in response to a dissertation study from Sheehy, which found that most in-service teachers report that they do not engage with scholarly publications after they've graduated from Teachers College, due to their use of inaccessible language, associated cost, and unengaging formats. I feel that many scholars may be rightfully weary of a proposal that academics should employ practices rooted in the discourses of social media and social media platforms themselves to disseminate their research. Boyd notes that social media is now intertwined with neoliberal capitalism and data surveillance, and this sets off the spidey senses of many critical academics. I'd like to note that in this context I'm using Hall et al.'s definition of neoliberalism as an institutionalized framework founded in economic liberalization that most commonly manifests in privatization, deregulation, rationalism, and free marketization. Now, social media's association with neoliberalism and market consumerism is justified and worthy of critique. The exploitation of the human need for community to sell products and the frankly shady manner by which companies collect and sell our data to global conglomerates is incredibly problematic. Thus, many scholars are hesitant to explore social media and its implications for classrooms or academic practices within their published writings. The incredible Oxford Handbook of Social Media and Music Learning is a big step in addressing this, but the fact that it was published in 2020 says a lot about the field's previous resistance to acknowledging the impact these platforms have on the lives of teachers, students, musicians, and academics. In their foreword to the book, Shippers labels this resistance as striking and notes that the academic field of music education has been particularly slow to take advantage of the potential for social media to inform both teaching and scholarly practice. This presentation explores the ways in which tools of engagement utilised by users of the social media platform TikTok could lead the field of music education to disseminate their research in ways deemed more engaging and accessible for in-service educators. TikTok was specifically chosen for a few reasons. 1, it overtook Google as the most popular website online in 2021. 2, there are hardly any music education papers being published about an app that centers music and sound and collaboration as the driver of its content creation. And 3, because in my time scrolling through TikTok, I've deduced that it has learnt from and borrowed the tools of engagement designed to increase engagement and attention from every social media app preceding it, positioning TikTok as the current pinnacle when exploring exemplars of how social media has monopolized the so-called attention economy. Now, I sit right on the generational line between Gen Z and Gen Y, and thus I'm a part of a target demographic social media platforms appeal to in an attempt to poach users from one site to another. I had a MySpace in the mid-2000s that I still can't figure out how to delete. I have numerous Facebook pages and YouTube channels. I've used Snapchat, Instagram, Stories, and Reels to keep up with friends and document my life since before I was in high school. And as a result, I recognise the ways in which tools designed to keep me engaged and remain on a platform have evolved over time, and led to the curation of the social media platform I anecdotally believe is the most engaging and that studies show to be the most addictive. TikTok has aspects of community building that I associate with MySpace and Facebook, with various specialised subgroups with their own trends, aesthetics, and vocabularies easily found. Its use of interactive tools like polls, Q&As, and comments aids in the shaping and development of these communities. It uses videos in ways not dissimilar to YouTube, but within the strict short time limitations of Snapchat or Twitter character counts. This forces users to be direct, concise, and use accessible language that can be understood quickly by diverse audiences. And it's incredibly visually interesting. All of this is to say that TikTok has assessed all of the tools social media platforms recognize increase engagement in a Web 2.0 world and put them all together. It was explicitly designed to grab your attention and hold the attention of a diverse collective of people, which is something that the academic field of music education is not particularly good at. When looking at the ways in which music education scholars disseminate their research, we note an absence of many of the tools which encourage active engagement exemplified by social media platforms like TikTok. In fact, black and white PDFs of academic text literally look more similar to a handwritten scroll than they do of any of the methods of information dissemination associated with Web 2.0. And this aligns with Erkovich's critique of the field of music education's resistance to technology. They argue that the academy received technology with strategies of assimilation, where technology is perceived as a device to extend the status quo. Erkovich gives the example of an iPad being used in the classroom to display 300-year-old sheet music. The potential of the iPad to inform innovative approaches to teaching and learning is not embraced. It's just used to perpetuate existing paradigms of classroom instruction. The same thing has happened in the dissemination of our research. We've taken a black and white printout, the same as it has existed for hundreds of years, and we just put it inside a computer. Sometimes we might even repost that document onto our Facebook or LinkedIn pages, but we're not actually embracing any of the engagement methods Web 2.0 shows us work to create community, foster critical discussion, and increase interaction and engagement, which is what we present as being the goals of the dissemination of academic research in the first place. It's rare to see publications using colour images or diagrams or even using visual supports at all. We still don't see audio clips embedded into PDF publications in a field centered around sound, or QR codes sending people to external sites or resources. Thus, when printed, academic papers look very similar to the ways that they would have just after the invention of the typewriter, and we know that people's expectations for content creation have evolved so much since then. Relatedly, Crawford and Sheehy note that it takes non-academics a long time to read these scholarly publications, time that teachers are increasingly less likely to have with increasing workloads. Madison argues that the use of complex academic language contributes to this, stating that the researcher's analysis promotes theoretical jargon that renders the narrative analysis itself ineffectual at best and silly at worst. The researcher becomes so enamored with theoretical speak that the narrative is lost to the acrobatics of abstraction and theoretical wordplay. Unlike the discourses of social media, where concise and accessible language is considered key to appeal to wider and more diverse audiences, Lawrence Lightfoot describes the language of academic texts as exclusive and esoteric. Sheehy notes that this phenomenon sees many teachers avoid reading, writing, and engaging with scholarly research, as the barriers for entry lead them to conclude that this field is exclusive and elitist. Thus, it becomes possible and even likely that academic research is only read and disseminated amongst other academics, and that the thoughts, feelings, ideas, and opinions of in-service educators only rarely inform this field. Though we at times open up the boundaries of the academic field and allow teachers who meet criteria set by academics to present at some conferences or publish papers, and we as academics sometimes enter the in-service teaching communities to gather data and insight, Laprise notes that the distinction between academic communities and teaching communities is becoming more pronounced. And in doing so, these fields become less likely to collaborate and dialogue with each other, to the detriment of both. Muller and Young note that the fact that discourses which aim to quantify one's contribution to the field is reliant on the extent to which other academics cite a work, rather than the extent to which this research is deemed applicable to or of use of those working within classrooms, reinforces this distinction. Academics are not incentivized to seek the thoughts, ideas, or opinions of in-service teachers in response to their publications, contributing to more and more teachers arguing that research in scholarly journals is not relevant to their teaching. Relatedly, Sheehy notes that teachers are increasingly less likely to subscribe to academic journals, and it's notable that scholarly papers are often published on websites that do not allow for the types of commenting, interacting, and reacting associated with increased engagement on social media, and spaces where teachers can give their opinions to authors. Rather, we engage in those types of critical discussions either within academic classrooms, at academic conferences, or by publishing response papers months after the original is read. It's notable that all of these mediums are much more easily accessed by academics than in-service teachers. Thus, it's not surprising to note that teachers are increasingly looking for more open, more engaging mediums through which they can gain new teaching ideas, engage in critical discussions, and find a sense of community. And when considering that social media channels most highly value engaging, accessible, concise content that increases the likelihood of active community building, it's not surprising to see teachers turning to this medium. In some research I undertook with my friends Dr. Ruth Wright and soon-to-be Dr. Carl Devitz, which will be published as a book chapter later this year, we found that teachers were at times embarrassed or afraid to admit that they seek resources, discussion, and community on social media rather than within academic fields. This is a direct transcript from an interview with participant 1 after being asked where she goes to find new resources and lesson ideas relevant to her practice. She says, "This is going to, I guess, sound weird or bad. I follow a lot of teachers on Instagram. I feel like some older teachers are like super judgy about that, but I use Instagram a lot for ideas, like I follow a lot of teachers on Instagram. Blogs, like if I find an Instagram of a teacher I like, I'll see if they have a blog, and then Teachers Pay Teachers. I go on Teachers Pay Teachers all the time. Another participant in that research notes that they follow the Association of Popular Music Education online and engage with their Facebook posts to build a sense of community with other educators employing methods associated with popular musicianship, and this is not common within other teachers in his district. Jeanette et al. Knows that the curation of online communities where teachers could share ideas and resources was vital in the successful provision of professional development through Musical Futures Australia, particularly for those in regional and rural places who did not have other music educators within their geographic area. They note that such sites provide a collaborative problem-solving aspect not often found in traditional professional learning or traditional dissemination methods. A quick search of the hashtag musicteacher on TikTok or Instagram reveals countless in-service educators with tens of thousands of followers, sharing lesson plans, providing advice, and encouraging other teachers to engage in critical discussions using comments, reactions, and direct messages. These influencers use the tools of engagement associated with social media and social media platforms themselves to disseminate their ideas and reach more in-service teachers than many academics would dream of with just one post. Now, there are many pros to this. Social media can be accessed almost anywhere at any time for free. Teachers don't have to travel to attend conferences or pay frankly absurd fees for journal subscriptions. The discourse of the social media sees this content often taking the form of short videos which teachers can watch if they're strapped for time, and tend to use the kind of direct and concise language which Madison and Sheehy note is rare within scholarly publications. These online spaces can serve as deterritorialized online communities, where teachers across the world can ask each other questions, share resources, and seek the experiences of a teaching community which is not limited by geography. Also, it encourages teachers to continue critically reflecting on their practices and seeking exposure to new ideas and approaches across their careers, not just during designated professional development days. However, there are also some drawbacks to teachers retreating from the academic community to seek such resources on social media. Namely, the discourses of social media mean that anyone can post and develop an audience without going through a rigorous process of peer review and critical reflexivity. This opens up the opportunity for uninterrogated problematic ideas to be widely circulated to inform the practices of in-service teachers. As Muller and Young note, the power of the internet and social media have considerably amplified the possibilities and reach of non-rational persuasion. This is not only represented by conspiracy theorists or those who wish to expose alternate truths, but those who are genuinely trying to aid the field of music education without making the kinds of critical considerations required to be published in journals in an academic field. It's also notable that the algorithms of social media often create a feedback loop in which content a user likes or agrees with is more readily shown in their feed. Home notes that this enables them to avoid confrontation with the other. They can withdraw to their digital worlds and their digitally constructed references. In the field of academics, you are constantly forced to engage with ideas, approaches, thinkings, and critiques that you may disagree with, but this is increasingly rare within social media spaces. Band teachers are likely to find themselves in a bubble filled with other teachers who love band, popular music educators with other popular music educators. The ideas, thinking, critiques, or experiences of those outside of this bubble aren't even shown to them, and thus are unable to inform the critical thinking of educators. And the reason for this is simple and brings us back to social media's undeniable connection with neoliberalism. People who feel that they are a member of a community that supports their practice are more likely to be happy on their platform and thus spend more time there, allowing for more of their data to be mined and on-sold, and are more likely to buy the advertised products. Lippmann notes that neoliberalism reframes all social relations, all forms of knowledge and culture in terms of the market. All services established for the common good are potential targets of investment and profit-making. Waldron, Horsley, and Veblen remind us that we cannot ignore the reality that social media, much like music, is largely made publicly available through corporatization. We can't just turn a blind eye to the influence these neoliberal and consumerist discourses have on the processes, content, and engagement tools associated with social media. The two just can't be separated. And no amount of critique from the academic community is likely to cause any kind of change. Social media platforms make more money if anyone is able to post, if that content is created quickly without criticality, and if algorithms keep users happy. So we are forced to ask ourselves, should we remain absent from this medium of information dissemination at the protest of the discourses these platforms implicitly espouse? Is there any way we can, in good conscience, utilise these platforms whilst fundamentally disagreeing with the impact these neoliberal discourses have on the political and social arena in which we work and live? This is a question I seriously toyed with for quite some time, and surprisingly, this thinking took a sudden left turn and I ended up on Sesame Street. On a very long flight from Vancouver to Sydney, I found myself watching this documentary, which explored the early factors that led to the children's TV show Sesame Street being created. And it noted a willingness to be both critical of the neoliberal discourses informing the dominant medium of the time, in the case of the 1960s, this was television, and an openness to its potential to be used for educational means. Founder of Sesame Street, Joan Gans Cooney, noted that in the mid to late 1960s, every child in America was singing beer commercials. Now, where had they learnt beer commercials? A lot of children in America were walking into supermarkets and identifying products by having seen cheer on the screen. John Stone, another founder of Sesame Street, lamented that, "I've sat through so many children's shows, just terrible stuff. You're selling toys and breakfast cereals." It was clear that television was used as the medium to sell products and that its influence on the ways children interacted with the world was profound and looked upon with distaste by the founders of the show. And though these founders of Sesame Street were critical of the amount of time kids spent watching TV and of television's association with consumerism, they noted that the ability for such programs to hold the attention of people was unparalleled. These children were learning information through this medium. It just happened to be that only the information provided to them was created by marketing companies. Thus, instead of arguing that television's association with neoliberal and consumerist discourses should discount its use as an educational tool, they used marketing discourses to sell education to children. A spokesperson on Sesame Street in the 1960s notes, "We're planning to treat them essentially the same way a commercial enterprise would create a campaign. We're trying to sell the alphabet to preschool children." Dialogue like "This program is brought to you by the letter X" and the use of Jim Henson's puppeteering company Muppets Inc., which was previously utilized to sell consumer products to adults, also exemplifies this. Sesame Street was not afraid to embrace the languages and techniques associated with marketization and neoliberalism to reach its goal of connecting to children, as they knew these languages and techniques worked to hold the attention and influence the behaviors of viewers. Thus, they came up with a notion that John Stone describes as brilliantly simple. Children were watching a tremendous amount of television. If they're going to watch that much television, why not 1, find out what it is they would like to watch, 2, find out what would be good for them to watch, and then you put the two together. When we take this notion and place it in the context of this presentation, we know that teachers are increasingly turning to social media to find new resources, discussion points, and communities which may inform their practice. Whether we agree with this or not is irrelevant. It's already happening. We can either keep these spaces and communities distinct or enter these spaces where teachers are already located and attempt to reopen dialogue with those we have either consciously or unconsciously excluded from the field. We already know what it is that social media users like to watch. It's content that follows these basic principles of engagement, exemplified by the popularity of TikTok and other social media platforms. We already know the information we want teachers to have as academics, namely the results of peer-reviewed academic studies which can prompt critical reflection and inform practice. Now we have to think about the ways to put the two together. I figured the best way to explore this would be to give it a go, so I've started a project called Inertia Education. We use tools social media platforms note increase attention and engagement on their sites to disseminate scholarly research to networks of in-service teachers, and we follow the noted principles of engagement when creating content. Inertia uses short-form videos which use animation and visual aids to support comprehension. The use of lay language in these videos is paramount, as is the ability to be concise. We embrace tools of active engagement like reactions, comments, and direct messaging to encourage the development of a dialectic community, where the voices of academics, teachers, musicians, students, and policymakers can potentially come together in the same online spaces. All of these videos have strict time limits, as is exemplified by the first video series we have coming out in September called My Dissertation in Under 12 Minutes, where PhD graduates summarize their dissertation research via a medium aimed at teachers rather than dissertation committees. The first 2 videos with Dr. Kelly Bieliker, who is a professor of music education at Boston University, and Dr. Elizabeth Kinghorn, who is doing their postdoctoral work at the Music, Cognition, and the Brain Institute at Western, are currently in production. We also have another series coming out early next year called My Paper in Under 10 Minutes, which is a similar concept but summarising peer-reviewed journal publication. We already have quite a few journals on board who have agreed to give blanket permission to all authors to create video summaries published on Inertia's site, and we're really grateful for that. Shippers notes that social media gives us cause to rethink how the very nature of creating, developing, disseminating, and accessing information has changed, moving away from the model of a centralized fount of knowledge and towards one of multiple networked sources. We hope that in creating Inertia, we can curate a more dialectic community, which allows the thoughts, ideas, and experiences of different agents within the field of music education to come together and inform future scholarly practice. In analysing the tools utilised by social media influencers and being inspired by the willingness to embrace mediums critiqued for their association with consumerism as exemplified by Sesame Street, we hope that the upcoming projects are able to do just that. But Inertia is just an experiment in whether the field of academic music education can find a place within social media spaces, and thus in the lives of in-service educators, musicians, and students. Perhaps the neoliberal discourses of social media make this impossible while still espousing academic integrity. However, what we've found in the very short time we've spent creating this medium is that teachers are calling for a centralized space where they can consistently go to find a broader, more critical discussion of music education scholarship. Inertia's social media pages and website aim to provide this space. If you'd like to know more about Inertia or you'd like to create a summary of your dissertation or published paper, please email us at inertiaeducation@gmail.com. We are always seeking new contributors and folks with ideas of how this initiative should move forward in the future. Thank you so much for having me virtually, Mayday. I really, really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.